I live in a very typical suburban neighborhood. I don't have a ton of storage space. I don't have a ton of garden space. I have just over 1/8 of an acre of land. And even though I've been learning how to preserve my own food for small spaces, I just don't have a lot of storage space. But I've learned a few tricks along the way. So today we will dig into fall harvest preservation for small spaces by looking at how to dry fresh cut flowers, make beautiful dried flower arrangements, prep sweet potatoes for fall storage, ferment veggies from the garden, and preserve herbs in 2 ways. Preserving summer flowers is my way of hanging on to one of the greatest joys of this year, which was my cut flower garden. I am new to flower gardening and cut flowers. I learned a lot along the way, but it was so nice having fresh flowers in the house every single day. And I'm feeling a little bummed that frost is around the corner and I won't have fresh flowers anymore. So on this day, I went around my house and took some trimmings of flowers and herbs so I can dry them and hopefully enjoy them throughout fall and winter. I just took a few trimmings from each plant. I don't have the setup at the moment to have a ton of flowers hanging around. I've seen those drying racks that create those beautiful flower clouds, they call them, but I'm not prepared for that. So a few flowers will do just fine. I laid them out on a nice big towel just to get them cleaned up and organized. And I just used some plain old twine to wrap around the stem. If you're bundling them, just bundle a couple together so that way they get enough air circulation to actually dry out. Wrap the twine around, I'd say probably 4 or 5 times just to make sure that they're tightly held together. And don't forget to leave some ends of the twine so you can actually hang them from the drying rack. And when you're done, it's time to hang them. And remember, you don't need a fancy cottage shed or garden space to do this. This is me with the closed drying rack in my living room, and it worked out just fine. And in fact, it looked beautiful sitting in my living room while they were drying. These will need to hang out for a week or so they can fully dry. So I'll let you know how it goes in an upcoming video. But another really easy way to preserve your summer flower harvest is by pressing flowers. A few weeks ago, I grabbed some flowers from the garden, put them underneath a piece of wood and put some hand weights on top. And I let them sit in the spare room for about 4 weeks. When they were totally dry, I arranged them on a piece of paper and put them in a cute gold frame. Now I do think some linen would look cute underneath of them rather than paper. So I'll probably swap that out. But this is great for fall decor. It's great for preservation, and it was really easy to do. Preserving herbs is great for small spaces or for homes that don't have a cellar or a huge pantry. So I like to just go out, grab the herbs I want, give them a good wash, and then lay them out on a clean towel to dry. They will need to sit there for a while and ensure they are totally dry before freezing or preserving them in butter. So we'll get back to these later in the video. Any damaged or bruised leaves, I'm just taking out to the composter. And even though composting is actually the opposite of preservation, it's decomposing, it's really a way of preserving your scraps for next year in your garden. I just got this aerobic composter. It's perfect for small spaces and suburban lifestyle. The HOA approves. You can check it out in the description box below. We grew sweet potatoes in grow bags in our small backyard garden, and they're on our fire pit because a gang of bunnies kept eating the vines. But we had a great sweet potato harvest, especially for our first year growing sweet potatoes. So now that they're all cured, on this day, it was time to actually get them prepared for storage. Many folks use newspaper to wrap their sweet potatoes, but I didn't have any, so I used brown paper. I wrapped each potato individually in paper and placed it in a box. Ideally, these would be stored in about 55 to 60 degrees, but that's not going to happen here in southeastern North Carolina. It's hot, I live at sea level, and I don't have a cellar. So these will go in the pantry. My goal for food preservation is to use what I preserve and not hang on to it too long, so this works out perfectly. Of course, not all food preservation is that easy. I spent much of my summer learning how to can in small batches for my small pantry, but I also have a bumper crop of green peppers, and some fell off when Tropical Storm Ophelia made landfall here in North Carolina. This is a really great opportunity to preserve vegetables without the hassle of canning, even though I found canning to actually not be too hard. So I really like to use lacto-fermentation as a way to preserve small batch vegetables. You don't need a lot of food to do it, and you definitely don't need a lot of space or supplies to ferment vegetables. I'll leave a link for this in the description box below, but you'll see here, I'm only doing 1 jar. Often when we think of things like jarred food or canned food, we think of these huge batches, but this is just 1 pint jar and 4 small peppers that I am stuffing into the jar. The brine ratio is 3 tablespoons of salt per quart of filtered water. So here you can see I'm just adding the salt into the water, and you do want to make sure you give it a pretty good whirl so that way the salt is fully dissolved in the water. I forgot to mention earlier, you can do this with store-bought peppers too. Once you are ready, pour the brine over the peppers, and then you'll want to make sure the peppers are under the brine. Use a weight or some sort of tool to do that. Here, I am using just a little silicone funnel to make sure that the peppers are underneath the brine. Then put a lid on your jar. If you're using a screw-on lid like this, you will want to burp it every day, or you can use a fermentation lid if you have one. Place it on your counter for a few weeks. I find they taste best after about 3 weeks or so. Finally, it's time to get back to the herbs. They have been sitting out on the counter all day at this point. So here I am bagging up basil. It's nice and dry. I'm putting it in a Ziploc bag. And I have other frozen herbs in a Ziploc bag. So what I do is I put the herbs in a small bag, put that inside of another freezer bag, and then put all of that inside of another freezer bag. The reason I do that is because the aroma of the herbs can be overpowering, and some of your other foods in the freezer can absorb that. So really you want to double or triple bag them. Frozen herbs are best used when frozen. So here I took some frozen oregano and threw it into a sourdough discard skillet. And for this soup, I just added frozen basil right to the pot. I have another recent video about freezing fresh ingredients. I'll link that in the description box below. But on this day, I also preserved garlic chives in butter. Now you can do this with any type of herb in your garden, but I really like garlic chives because it makes delicious garlic bread. So here all I did is finely chop up some chives and put them in a small bowl. There are no strict rules about how much you need in terms of herbs. I found that what I have in the bowl is good for my taste preferences for about 2 sticks of butter. So you'll need whatever you have in herbs plus 1 or more sticks of room temperature butter. You definitely want to make sure it's not cold and it is truly room temperature so that way you can mash it into the herbs. I also added in about a tablespoon or so of store-bought lemon juice and some coarse kosher salt. Of course, you can change and adjust the ingredients to suit your preferences, but once you get everything in the bowl, it's time to just mix and mash until everything is nicely combined. To save space and for easeful use, I like to take my compound butters and shape them into a butter roll. So to do this, you'll just need to clean off your countertop, grab a piece of parchment paper, and place your compound butter mixture onto your parchment paper. Somewhere between the middle of the parchment paper will work just fine. Then you'll notice here, my child was starting to get into things and I was pretty distracted, so I made a mistake, but just bear with me, all will be fine in the end. You will just fold the parchment paper over and make sure that you have some sort of tool that has a flat edge, like a cookie sheet, or in this case, I'm using a little wire baking rack. This is where I messed up. So you can see I'm holding both ends of the parchment paper. You should hold just the bottom end of the parchment paper, so that way when you push the flat end of the sheet away from you, it can actually roll. But this still worked out just fine. It just wasn't quite as easy as it could have been, but it was a beautiful butter roll. It's going to taste delicious. Just roll it on up, fold the ends over, throw it in a freezer bag, and you have preserved homegrown herbs that you can use for fall and even through winter. I make garlic bread with this all the time. I also preserve basil this way, and I just chop some of the frozen butter up, threw it right on top of some garden fresh tomatoes with a little bit of Parmesan cheese and threw it in the oven, and it was fantastic. You don't have to live on a homestead to experience the joy and benefits of fall harvest preservation. I hope this video today inspired you to think of ways to preserve your garden and your harvest, or even store-bought food and items in ways that work for your lifestyle, your needs, and your space. Thank you so much for tuning into my YouTube channel where we elevate the everyday from scratch and at home, and I will see you again next time.